Alex had just finished a long day at the police station. His uniform was neatly pressed, but he could feel the weight of the day in his shoulders. Being a police commander was not easy. Every day brought new challenges, complaints, and responsibilities. Today had been particularly hectic. A neighborhood dispute over parking had escalated, and a small fire in a local park had required his attention. Finally, he felt it was time to step away from work for a while and enjoy a small moment of normalcy. He decided to visit the local grocery store. The store was familiar to him and the staff knew him well. He liked the quiet routine of shopping for fresh vegetables, fruits, and bread. He preferred the early evening when the crowd was smaller and the atmosphere calmer. The bright lights of the store welcomed him as he pushed the cart down the first aisle. He picked up some apples, checking each one carefully before placing it in his cart. He smiled to himself as he remembered his daughter's love for apples and decided to pick the sweetest ones for her. As he moved to the next aisle, he noticed a young man acting impatient. The man was tall with short hair, and his expression showed annoyance. He kept looking at Alex's cart and muttering under his breath. Alex tried to ignore him at first, thinking the man was simply in a hurry. However, the man's behavior became more noticeable. He pushed his own cart closer to Alex and said in a sharp voice, "Why are you taking so long? Give me that." Alex stopped and turned to face him. He kept his voice calm and polite, knowing that confrontation was never the answer. "Excuse me, sir. These are my groceries. Please wait your turn." The man frowned and raised his voice. His tone was rude, almost demanding, as if Alex owed him something. The other shoppers began to notice the exchange. Some looked away politely while others kept a careful watch, unsure if the situation might escalate. Alex remained calm. He had learned over the years that keeping control of his emotions was important. As a police commander, he often had to deal with people who were angry, upset, or confused. He understood that sometimes people acted out because of stress or frustration. He took a deep breath and smiled politely at the young man, hoping that a calm presence would help diffuse the tension. The young man did not seem interested in calming down. Instead, he began to speak louder and more aggressively. "I need those groceries now. Give them to me or else." His words were harsh, and Alex could tell that the man was trying to provoke a reaction. The store staff noticed the exchange and quietly moved closer, keeping a respectful distance. Alex appreciated their awareness but wanted to handle the situation without making them feel uncomfortable. At that moment, Karen, the man's mother and a well-known member of the local homeowners association, was watching the store from her home across the street. Karen had always been careful about what she considered the proper behavior in her neighborhood. She prided herself on knowing every detail of what happened around her home. When she saw her son acting angrily, she immediately assumed that he was the victim and that someone needed to be punished. She picked up her phone and began to dial 911, determined to report a serious problem. Inside the store, Alex continued to handle the situation with patience. He asked the young man again to step back and wait. He explained politely that these were his groceries and that he had been shopping first. The young man refused to listen and started pushing his cart closer, trying to intimidate Alex. Shoppers began to shift nervously, sensing that something unusual was happening. Some whispered quietly to each other, trying to figure out who was in the right. Alex noticed a small child standing near the young man, clearly uncomfortable. He realized that keeping the situation calm was not just about himself, but also about everyone around him. He decided to change his approach slightly, speaking in a firm but gentle tone. "Listen, I do not want any trouble. Please respect my space, and you can wait until I'm finished." The young man hesitated for a moment, surprised by Alex's calmness. He was not used to being treated with patience when he was angry. Just as the tension began to shift, Alex noticed Karen's car pull up across the street. He recognized her immediately from past neighborhood meetings. Karen stepped out of her car, phone in hand, ready to escalate the situation further. Alex took a deep breath and prepared himself. He knew that handling conflict sometimes required not only patience but also strategy. He had to be careful, clear, and professional. The young man continued to glare at him, but Alex maintained eye contact and stayed composed. He understood that showing fear or frustration would only encourage the man to continue his behavior. As Karen started moving toward the store, Alex quietly assessed the situation. He knew that it was going to be a delicate moment. He also realized something important. Sometimes people acted out not because of real problems, but because of misunderstandings, pride, or impatience. Today he was going to manage the situation with care, ensuring that everyone remained safe, and that the young man and his mother learned a valuable lesson about respect and patience. Alex pushed his cart slowly toward the checkout, keeping his voice calm and steady. He hoped that by remaining professional, the situation would resolve itself without incident. As he walked, he noticed the young man muttering angrily, clearly frustrated that he could not intimidate Alex. Shoppers continued to watch silently, curious about what would happen next. At that moment, Alex could feel the tension in the air. He understood that today's encounter would be remembered by everyone present. He also knew that, as a police commander, it was his responsibility to lead by example, showing calm, patience, and professionalism even in difficult situations. Karen could not believe what she was seeing. From her car across the street, she watched her son arguing with a man in the grocery store. She felt a rush of anger and worry. In her mind, her son was the victim and this man was being aggressive. She gripped her phone tightly, keeping it ready to call for help. Her eyes never left the store as she dialed 911. She explained in a rushed voice that her son was in danger and that a man was refusing to give him his groceries. She added extra details, hoping to make the situation sound urgent. Meanwhile, inside the store, Alex continued to maintain his calm. He pushed his cart slowly toward the checkout counter. He kept an eye on the young man, who was clearly frustrated that his attempts to intimidate Alex were not working. Alex's presence was calm but commanding. He spoke softly and clearly, making sure the young man understood that there was no need for conflict. Other shoppers observed quietly. Some felt impressed by Alex's patience, while others felt a little nervous about the confrontation. The young man's behavior grew more aggressive as he realized that his mother was likely calling the authorities. He waved his hands and shouted, trying to make the situation seem worse than it was. "See, they won't let me take my groceries. Someone do something." He hoped that the store staff or passing shoppers would intervene on his behalf. Alex, however, did not react with anger or frustration. He knew that losing his temper would only make things worse. He stayed calm and moved slowly toward the cashier, making sure to block unnecessary contact with the young man. He smiled politely, keeping his voice even. "Please allow me to finish checking out. You can pay for your items after me." At that moment, the store staff began to feel the tension in the air. The cashier, a young woman named Maria, recognized Alex from community events. She trusted him and knew that he was a high-ranking officer in the area. She stayed calm, hoping the situation would resolve quickly. Other shoppers were curious, but no one wanted to get involved unless necessary. Outside, Karen's anger and worry grew as she watched the events unfold. She stepped out of her car, phone still in hand, and walked toward the store entrance. She had always believed that she was a responsible and protective mother. She also believed that calling for help was the right action whenever she felt her family was in danger. Today, she was convinced that she was doing the right thing. Inside, Alex noticed Karen approaching. He recognized her immediately. She was the same woman who often complained about minor issues in the neighborhood. He also remembered that she was involved in several community disputes over property and rules. Alex realized that the situation could become more complicated once Karen entered the store. He prepared himself to handle the encounter with patience and professionalism. The young man glanced toward the entrance and saw his mother walking in. His eyes brightened and he felt a sense of support. He continued to argue with Alex, hoping his mother would intervene. He did not realize that the man he was confronting was the police commander, a fact that would soon change the dynamics entirely. As Karen entered the store, she immediately approached Alex and her son. She raised her voice slightly, expressing her concern for her son and insisting that something should be done. "He is refusing to give my son his groceries. This is unacceptable. Someone must act." She spoke quickly, not noticing the calm and collected demeanor of Alex. Alex looked at Karen and smiled politely. He remained calm, speaking in a soft but firm voice. "Hello, Karen, I understand your concern. Let me explain what happened here so we can resolve this properly." He gestured toward her son, who now seemed confused and unsure. Alex's calm presence immediately shifted the energy in the store. Karen's anger began to soften slightly. Though she still felt defensive, Alex continued, explaining the situation step by step. "Your son approached me aggressively and demanded my groceries. I asked him to wait politely, and I am trying to keep this peaceful. There is no reason for conflict. Everyone here can leave the store safely without any problems. His words were clear, calm, and professional. Karen listened, but was still hesitant. She had always felt that calling the authorities was necessary whenever her family faced a problem. She looked around, noticing the other shoppers who were quietly observing the situation. Some nodded subtly, understanding Alex's calm authority. Karen realized that perhaps she had overreacted. Her son, now quiet, began to understand that his actions had caused unnecessary tension. He looked at Alex with a mixture of embarrassment and surprise. He had not expected the man he confronted to remain so composed and professional. Alex gave him a polite nod, signaling that he expected respectful behavior moving forward. Maria, the cashier, smiled slightly, relieved that the situation was calming down. She had seen many small disputes in the store but recognized that this one could have escalated quickly, if not for Alex's calm intervention. Other shoppers began to relax, moving back to their routines while still watching quietly. Karen finally spoke, her voice softer. I may have overreacted. I thought my son was in danger. Alex nodded politely. It is understandable to be concerned for family. However, it is important to assess the situation carefully before calling for help. Everyone's safety is important, including other shoppers. Karen nodded, realizing that she had allowed her emotions to influence her judgment. Alex turned his attention back to the young man. Let's make sure we handle this respectfully. You can pay for your items calmly. Everyone will be fine. The young man hesitated but then moved toward the cashier, now aware that his mother's support was not a reason to continue aggressive behavior. The store began to return to normal. Alex finished his checkout, thanked Maria politely, and prepared to leave. Karen stayed nearby, still a little embarrassed but beginning to understand the lesson of patience, respect, and clear communication. Alex smiled, knowing that this small moment would have a lasting impact. He had handled the situation professionally, ensuring safety and teaching a lesson without conflict. As he pushed his cart toward the exit, the other shoppers whispered quietly among themselves, impressed by his calm authority and ability to manage a tense situation.
The store had returned to a sense of quiet, but the tension was far from gone. Alex had finished picking up most of his groceries, yet he remained alert. His eyes constantly scanned the aisles, observing the young man and Karen as they stood nearby. The young man's face still carried frustration, a mix of embarrassment and anger. He had expected his mother's presence to intimidate Alex, but the calm authority of the police commander was something he had not anticipated. Karen, on the other hand, felt a growing sense of confusion. She had entered the store determined to protect her son, but now she was unsure how to act. Alex's steady presence and polite explanation made her pause. She realized that she had acted quickly without understanding the full situation. Her son's rude behavior had clearly contributed to the confrontation. Karen had always believed in taking immediate action, but she began to see that patience and observation could be more effective. The young man, feeling the shift in his mother's attitude, attempted one last effort to assert himself. He stepped closer to Alex, his voice raised slightly. "This is not fair. I should get my groceries first." He looked around at the other shoppers, hoping they would support his claim. Some shoppers glanced at him curiously, but most avoided eye contact. No one wanted to get involved, yet everyone could sense the rising tension. Alex remained calm, his voice gentle but firm. "I understand your frustration. You can wait patiently, and no one will be harmed. Please respect other people in this store." He kept his posture relaxed and his tone steady, showing that he was in control without being threatening. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of authority and experience. The young man hesitated. He had never encountered someone who could remain so composed in the face of anger. His initial confidence began to fade. He looked at his mother for support, but Karen was now quiet, her previous energy replaced by uncertainty. She realized that her quick call to 911 had complicated the situation rather than solved it. Alex decided to take a slightly different approach. He crouched slightly, speaking in a softer voice directly to the young man. Everyone makes mistakes. You can still handle this respectfully. Let's finish shopping calmly, and no one will have any trouble. His words were clear and easy to understand. The young man paused, his hands fidgeting with the edge of his cart. For the first time, he considered that his behavior had been inappropriate. Maria, the cashier, observed closely. She had worked in the store for years and had seen many minor conflicts, but this one felt different. The man at the center of the situation was not just calm, he was commanding respect without raising his voice. Maria felt a sense of relief knowing that Alex was handling the confrontation effectively. Other staff members quietly monitored the aisles, ready to assist if necessary but trusting Alex to manage the situation. Karen, still unsure of what to do, spoke hesitantly. I just wanted to make sure my son was safe. I thought something bad might happen. Her voice was quieter now, lacking the certainty she had felt moments before. Alex looked at her with understanding. It is natural to worry about family. The important thing is to stay calm and assess the situation carefully before calling for help. Safety is best maintained when we act with patience and respect. The young man, now noticing his mother's silence, lowered his voice. I guess I got carried away. I shouldn't have demanded those groceries like that. His words were soft, showing a mix of embarrassment and remorse. Alex nodded slightly, acknowledging the young man's willingness to change. It is good to recognize when behavior needs to change. Everyone learns from mistakes. The other shoppers, who had been observing quietly, began to relax. The tension in the air started to fade as they saw the young man calming down. Some whispered quietly to each other, impressed by Alex's ability to de-escalate the situation without raising his voice or causing conflict. Karen finally stepped back, realizing that her involvement had unintentionally escalated the situation. She looked at her son, who now appeared thoughtful and slightly ashamed. Alex continued toward the checkout counter, making sure the young man had space to follow if he wished. He kept his voice calm, speaking clearly, "Let's finish shopping without any more conflict. Everyone here deserves respect, including the people around you." The young man nodded, understanding the lesson. He moved his cart behind Alex, keeping a respectful distance. Karen remained near the entrance, silently observing. She realized that calling 911 had been unnecessary and that she had allowed fear and pride to cloud her judgment. She understood that patience and communication were often more effective than immediate action. For the first time, she considered that her approach to neighborhood issues might need adjustment. Alex approached the cashier, Maria, placing his items on the counter carefully. He smiled politely, acknowledging her presence and professionalism. Maria returned the smile, feeling relieved that the situation had not escalated into a more serious conflict. She noticed the young man waiting quietly behind Alex, looking slightly embarrassed but calm. As Alex began to check out, he glanced at Karen and her son. He nodded politely, showing that he recognized their presence but expected respectful behavior. Karen returned the nod, understanding that Alex had handled the situation with professionalism and patience. Her son looked at Alex, silently acknowledging that his behavior had been inappropriate. The store slowly returned to normal. Shoppers resumed their routines, feeling reassured that the situation was under control. Maria completed Alex's checkout with a polite smile, while the young man followed behind, quietly paying for his groceries. Karen watched, learning a subtle lesson about calm, observation, and respect. Alex gathered his groceries and moved toward the exit. He felt satisfied that the situation had been resolved without conflict or danger. He knew that his calm approach had prevented escalation and had taught a valuable lesson to both the young man and his mother. The other shoppers whispered quietly, impressed by his authority and professionalism. As Alex stepped outside, he felt a sense of relief. The confrontation had been handled carefully, and everyone had learned an important lesson about patience, communication, and respect. He walked to his car, groceries in hand, knowing that his calm actions had made a difference. Outside the store, Karen paced nervously. She kept her phone pressed to her ear, speaking rapidly into it. Her voice was urgent and full of concern. "My son is in danger. A man inside the store is refusing to give him his groceries. Someone needs to help immediately." She explained every detail she could think of, emphasizing her son's frustration and her own worry. She wanted the dispatcher to understand that she believed this was serious. The dispatcher on the other end listened calmly, asking Karen to describe the situation clearly. Karen spoke quickly, not noticing that her excitement and fear were making her explanation sound more dramatic than it was. "He is very aggressive. He is standing there refusing to let my son take his items. I do not know what he will do next." She could hear the dispatcher reassuring her, but she continued explaining, convinced that her son was at risk. Meanwhile, inside the store, Alex had finished his checkout. He had moved calmly toward the exit, carrying his groceries with care. The young man had followed, looking a little embarrassed and quieter than before. Alex kept his eyes on the shoppers around him, making sure everyone remained comfortable. The store staff had returned to their usual tasks, but they stayed alert, knowing that Karen and her son were outside. Karen finally stepped closer to the store entrance, still speaking rapidly into the phone. She waved her hand toward the man inside, pointing at Alex. "Yes, he is the one. He is refusing to let my son have his groceries. Please come quickly." She hung up, confident that the police would arrive immediately. In her mind, she had done the right thing to protect her child. She had no idea that the man she had reported was the police commander responsible for managing the local precinct. Alex noticed Karen's movements but did not react with alarm. He understood that some people acted quickly out of worry and sometimes misunderstood situations. He slowed his pace slightly, remaining calm and professional. His presence was steady and reassuring. He smiled politely at Karen without acknowledging her accusations directly, knowing that a calm demeanor would help prevent the situation from escalating further. The young man glanced at his mother, unsure how to respond. He had hoped her arrival would support his demands, but he realized that the man they confronted remained calm and composed. He could feel his mother's anxiety, but he also sensed that she was losing confidence in her own judgment. Alex's calm authority made it clear that no aggressive behavior would succeed here. As Karen waited outside, she heard the sound of sirens in the distance. She assumed that the police were responding to her call and felt a mix of relief and anticipation. She imagined the situation escalating in her mind and expected the officers to immediately intervene. Inside the store, Alex noticed her tense posture and subtle hand movements. He understood that Karen's anxiety might increase if he did not handle this with care. Alex moved toward the store's entrance, maintaining a polite distance. He spoke in a clear, gentle voice, addressing both Karen and her son. "I understand your concern, but everything is calm here. No one is in danger. Let us handle this quietly and respectfully." His words were simple, yet they carried authority and reassurance. Karen paused, noticing his tone and posture. She realized that he was not only calm but also in control of the situation. The young man's frustration began to fade. He looked at his mother, then at Alex, and understood that the man had no intention of allowing conflict. His previous confidence had diminished, replaced by a sense of humility. Alex gave a subtle nod, indicating that respectful behavior was expected. The young man slowly lowered his voice and stepped back, holding his cart behind him without making another demand. Karen, still outside, began to reconsider her actions. She realized that she had called the authorities prematurely. Her concern for her son was natural, but she had allowed fear and quick assumptions to guide her behavior. She looked at Alex and saw his calm presence. For the first time, she understood that patience and observation could be more effective than immediate action. The sirens grew louder, and a patrol car pulled up near the store. Karen's heart raced as she thought about what the police would do. Inside the store, Alex acknowledged the arrival of the officers with a polite nod. The young man looked surprised, realizing that the situation could have escalated if Alex had not remained calm. Alex's reputation and experience ensured that everything remained under control. The officers stepped out of the patrol car, scanning the area quickly. They looked at the scene, noticing Alex, the young man, and Karen. They were momentarily confused, seeing that the situation appeared calm. Alex approached them calmly, greeting them politely. "Hello, officers. Everything is under control. This is the young man's mother, and here is her son. There is no threat, and no one needs assistance at this time." Karen felt a mixture of embarrassment and relief. She had expected immediate action, but now she realized that Alex had already managed the situation carefully. The officers exchanged glances, impressed by his control and professionalism. They understood that the tension had been resolved before it became a serious problem. The young man looked at his mother and realized that he had caused unnecessary worry. He lowered his gaze, quietly apologizing for his behavior. Karen finally spoke, her voice soft, admitting, "I think I overreacted. I did not fully understand what was happening." Alex nodded politely, acknowledging her honesty and offering a gentle reminder. It is important to remain calm and observe before calling for help. Everyone's safety is important, and clear communication helps avoid unnecessary worry. The store slowly returned to normal. Shoppers resumed their activities, feeling reassured that the situation had been handled without conflict. Maria, the cashier, smiled quietly, impressed by Alex's ability to manage a tense moment with patience and professionalism. The young man quietly completed his checkout, following Alex's example of respectful behavior. Alex gathered his groceries and stepped outside, giving Karen and her son a polite nod. He walked calmly to his car, knowing that the situation had taught an important lesson to everyone involved. Karen remained near the entrance, reflecting on her actions and considering how she might respond differently in the future. The young man followed her lead, quietly accepting the importance of respect, patience, and calm behavior. The sirens faded into the distance, leaving behind a quiet and peaceful street. Alex loaded his groceries into his car, feeling a sense of satisfaction. He had handled a potentially difficult situation with skill, preventing conflict, and teaching a lesson in calm authority and understanding. Karen and her son would not forget this encounter, and the neighborhood would remember how patience and careful observation could prevent unnecessary trouble. Karen finally entered the store. She had been standing outside, feeling a mix of worry, pride, and frustration. Her eyes scanned the aisles until she spotted Alex calmly walking toward the exit with his groceries. Her son trailed behind him, quieter now, no longer acting aggressively. Karen took a deep breath, feeling a little confused. She had expected a scene, but everything seemed calm. Alex noticed her approach. He stopped and turned slightly to face her, keeping his posture relaxed and non-threatening. He had learned over the years that people often acted out of fear, pride, or misunderstanding. He had dealt with similar situations many times, and his calm presence often helped prevent escalation. He smiled politely, acknowledging Karen without being confrontational. Karen raised her voice slightly, trying to express her concern. "He is refusing to give my son his groceries. You need to do something. This is unacceptable." She gestured toward Alex and then toward her son, expecting him to defend her claims. Her tone was firm, but there was uncertainty in her eyes. She wanted to be seen as a responsible mother, taking action to protect her child. Alex remained calm, speaking clearly and softly, ensuring his words carried authority without anger. "Karen, I understand that you are concerned for your son. It is natural to want to protect family. However, everything here is calm. There is no danger, and no one is being harmed. Let me explain what happened so we can resolve this peacefully." His voice was steady and professional, and the tone encouraged understanding rather than confrontation. Karen paused, hearing his words. Her instincts told her to argue, but she noticed the calmness in Alex's voice and posture. She realized that the situation was not as serious as she had imagined. Her son stood quietly, looking at Alex with a mixture of embarrassment and curiosity. He had not expected the man he confronted to remain so composed. Alex continued, speaking politely but firmly. "Your son approached me aggressively and demanded my groceries. I asked him to wait politely while I completed my shopping. I have managed the situation carefully to ensure no one was harmed and everyone remained safe." He gestured to the other shoppers who were quietly observing the situation, showing that everything was under control. The young man looked down, clearly embarrassed. He realized that his behavior had caused unnecessary tension. His mother's protective instincts had made him feel justified at first, but now he could see that his actions were wrong. He quietly said, I shouldn't have demanded the groceries. I got carried away." His words were soft, showing both humility and regret. Karen shifted slightly, realizing that she had overreacted. Her initial confidence had faded, replaced by uncertainty. She had assumed the worst without seeing the full situation. Alex's calm demeanor allowed her to reflect on her actions without feeling attacked. She understood that sometimes fear could cloud judgment, and that patience was often the better choice. Alex addressed both of them with a gentle tone. "It is important to recognize when behavior needs correction. Everyone learns from mistakes. Your son has already shown that he understands this, and I am confident that he will handle situations better in the future." His words were encouraging, making the young man feel respected while emphasizing the importance of proper behavior. Karen nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson. She realized that her attempt to escalate the situation had caused more worry than necessary. She looked at Alex, seeing him not as an opponent but as someone handling the situation with professionalism and care. Her voice softened. "I think I may have overreacted. I thought my son was in danger." Alex smiled politely. "It is natural to be concerned. The key is to observe carefully and communicate clearly before assuming the worst. Safety and respect for everyone are the most important things." His words were simple, but they carried meaning. Karen felt the truth in his statement. She had learned an important lesson about calm observation and understanding before taking action. The young man, still standing quietly, nodded in agreement. He looked at his mother and then at Alex. He realized that his initial behavior had caused unnecessary tension and embarrassment. He quietly apologized to Alex. "I am sorry for my behavior. I will be more respectful in the future." Alex acknowledged the apology with a polite nod. "Thank you for taking responsibility. Recognizing mistakes is the first step to improving behavior. I am confident that you will handle similar situations better in the future." His words encouraged both respect and personal growth. The store staff, who had been observing from behind the counter, quietly resumed their work. They noticed that the situation, which could have escalated into a scene, had been resolved peacefully. Other shoppers whispered quietly, impressed by Alex's ability to handle the situation with patience and authority. Karen finally turned to her son, speaking softly. "I understand now. We should have stayed calm and observed before calling for help. I will remember this lesson for the future." Her voice carried both reflection and a sense of relief. The young man nodded quietly, understanding that respect and patience were important, both for him and for his mother. Alex gathered his groceries, preparing to leave the store. He smiled politely at Karen and her son. "Thank you for your understanding. I hope this experience helps in the future. Safety and respect make every situation easier to handle." His calm authority left a lasting impression on both Karen and her son. As he walked toward the exit, the other shoppers whispered quietly among themselves, impressed by his professionalism and composure. Karen and her son remained near the entrance, reflecting on the encounter and the lessons they had learned. Alex had handled the situation without anger, without confrontation, and without unnecessary escalation. His calm response had prevented conflict and taught a meaningful lesson about patience, respect, and clear communication. Alex stepped outside, carrying his groceries, feeling satisfied. He had turned a potentially tense situation into a learning experience for both Karen and her son. The young man had learned humility, his mother had learned patience, and the store returned to a peaceful atmosphere. His calm and professional actions had ensured that everyone walked away safely and with a better understanding of respect and responsibility. After Alex left the store, Karen and her son stood quietly near the entrance. The young man looked at his mother, feeling a mix of guilt and relief. He realized that his behavior had caused unnecessary stress for everyone involved. His mother, on the other hand, reflected on her own actions. She had acted quickly out of worry, but she now understood that fear had clouded her judgment. Both of them had learned valuable lessons from the encounter. The young man spoke first, his voice soft. "Mom, I think I was wrong. I should not have demanded the groceries like that. I was rude, and I embarrassed myself." His words were honest, showing that he had taken responsibility for his actions. Karen nodded slowly, impressed by her son's willingness to admit his mistake. She felt a mixture of pride and relief, knowing that he was learning to act more respectfully. Karen took a deep breath and spoke carefully. "I realize now that I overreacted too. I should have stayed calm and observed before calling the police. I let my worry take over, and that made the situation worse." Her voice was quieter than before, carrying reflection rather than urgency. She understood that both of them had allowed emotions to drive their behavior instead of patience and reason. The young man looked around the store. Other shoppers were returning to their routines, and the staff had resumed their work. He felt grateful that the situation had not escalated further. "At least no one got hurt," he said. I guess we learned the hard way. Karen smiled gently, placing her hand on his shoulder. Yes, we did. Sometimes it takes a mistake to understand what really matters. Inside the store, Maria, the cashier, observed from a distance. She felt impressed by Alex's handling of the situation. His calmness, patience, and professional approach had prevented what could have been a major scene. She realized that his example was something everyone could learn from. She smiled quietly, thinking about how important it was to remain composed even when others acted aggressively or irrationally. The young man turned to his mother. Mom, I think I need to apologize properly to Alex. He handled everything so calmly. I should show him respect for that. Karen nodded in agreement. Yes, that is a good idea. He taught us an important lesson today. It is never too late to apologize and show respect. They both felt that acknowledging their mistake was an important step in moving forward. Karen and her son walked toward the store entrance, preparing to find Alex before he left. They knew it was important to express their respect and gratitude. As they approached, they noticed him loading his groceries into his car. He looked up and smiled politely as they approached. His demeanor remained calm and composed, showing that he was not offended by their earlier behavior. The young man spoke first, his voice respectful. Sir, I want to apologize for my behavior earlier. I was rude and demanded your groceries. That was wrong, and I am sorry. Alex nodded, appreciating the honesty in the apology. Thank you for acknowledging that. Taking responsibility for your actions is an important part of learning and growing. His voice was kind, yet it carried authority and respect. Karen followed, speaking softly. I also want to apologize. I overreacted and called for help unnecessarily. I should have observed the situation before assuming the worst. Thank you for handling everything so calmly. Alex looked at her with a polite smile. I understand your concern for your family. Worrying is natural. The key is to balance concern with calm observation. That ensures safety for everyone. The young man nodded, feeling a sense of relief and understanding. He realized that his behavior had been influenced by impatience and pride, and he was grateful for the example Alex had set. Karen also felt a sense of gratitude, recognizing that calmness and patience could prevent unnecessary problems. They both understood that the encounter was more than just about groceries. It was about respect, responsibility, and the value of thoughtful behavior. Maria, the cashier, watched as the family spoke to Alex outside. She felt inspired by the way the situation had been handled. She thought about how patience, clear communication, and respect could prevent many conflicts in everyday life. She returned to her work, quietly reflecting on the lessons she had observed that day. The young man looked at his mother and smiled. I think I understand now. It is better to stay calm and respectful, even when we feel frustrated. Acting out only makes things worse. Karen nodded in agreement, feeling proud of the growth in her son. Yes, and observing carefully before reacting is also very important. We both learned that today. Alex smiled politely, packing the last of his groceries into his car. I am glad that you understand the lessons from this experience. Respect and calmness go a long way in resolving conflicts. Remember that patience and communication make every situation easier to manage. His words were simple but carried meaning for both Karen and her son. As Alex prepared to leave, Karen and her son waved politely. They felt a sense of relief and understanding. The encounter had taught them valuable lessons about behavior, respect, and patience. They knew that they would remember this day and use what they had learned in future situations. The street returned to its quiet state. Shoppers and store staff resumed their activities, carrying a sense of calm after the earlier tension. Karen and her son walked home together, discussing what they had learned. They reflected on the importance of calm observation, clear communication, and respecting others even when frustrated. Alex drove away from the store, feeling satisfied. The situation had been handled successfully, without conflict or harm. He knew that both Karen and her son had learned important lessons, and that the neighborhood would be safer for it. His calm actions and professional approach had prevented a potentially difficult situation from escalating, teaching everyone involved a valuable lesson about respect, patience, and thoughtful behavior. The sun was beginning to set as Karen and her son walked slowly back to their home. The events at the store had left them both quiet, each lost in thought. The young man glanced at his mother, feeling a sense of responsibility. He understood now that his behavior had been immature and disruptive. Karen, meanwhile, reflected on her own actions and the way she had reacted without full knowledge of the situation. Both of them had learned valuable lessons about patience, respect, and thoughtful decision-making. As they approached their house, the young man spoke first. "Mom, I think I understand now. It is not right to demand things or act aggressively, even if I think I am in the right. I should have stayed calm and respectful." His words were sincere, showing that he was taking the lesson to heart. Karen smiled, feeling proud of his honesty. "Yes, that is very important. Acting with respect and patience helps avoid unnecessary conflict and keeps everyone safe." The young man nodded, still thinking about Alex and how calmly he had handled the situation. He realized that courage was not about raising one's voice or forcing people to give in. True courage was about staying composed, observing carefully, and making the right choices even when faced with provocation. He had witnessed this firsthand and hoped he could practice the same behavior in the future. Karen also spoke, her voice reflective. "I have learned an important lesson today. Worrying for family is natural, but acting without understanding the situation can make things worse. Calm observation and patience are always better than quick reactions." Her words carried wisdom born from experience, and her son listened closely. She realized that she had been too quick to assume the worst, and that humility and understanding were necessary for everyone. That evening, the neighborhood seemed quieter than usual. The grocery store had returned to its normal rhythm, and the shoppers who had witnessed the earlier confrontation reflected on what had happened. Maria, the cashier, continued her work but could not help thinking about the lessons she had observed. She admired Alex's professionalism and calmness and felt inspired to apply the same principles in her own life. The young man and his mother reached their front door. They paused for a moment, still processing the day's events. Karen spoke softly, "We should remember this day. It taught us the importance of respect, patience, and clear communication. We should carry these lessons forward in everything we do." Her son agreed, understanding that this experience was more than just about groceries. It was about behavior, values, and personal growth. Meanwhile, Alex returned to his home with his groceries. He reflected on the events of the day, feeling satisfied that the situation had been handled successfully. His calm and professional approach had prevented conflict, and he had taught a meaningful lesson to both Karen and her son. He understood that patience and respect were powerful tools in managing difficult situations and in teaching others how to act responsibly. Later that evening, Karen sat with her son at the kitchen table. They reviewed the events together, discussing what had happened and what they had learned. The young man admitted that he had let his pride and frustration get the best of him. Karen admitted that her worry had clouded her judgment. Together, they made a promise to approach future challenges with more thoughtfulness, patience, and understanding. The young man smiled, feeling a sense of relief. He realized that mistakes were opportunities to learn and grow. He also felt grateful to Alex for demonstrating how calmness and professionalism could resolve a difficult situation without conflict. Karen placed a hand on his shoulder, proud of his willingness to learn and change. The next day, the neighborhood buzzed with quiet conversation. Some neighbors had heard about the incident at the grocery store and were impressed by how calmly and effectively Alex had handled everything. People admired the way he had prevented a minor conflict from escalating and had taught valuable lessons about respect, patience, and responsibility. Alex's example became a subtle reminder to everyone in the community about the importance of calmness and professionalism. Karen and her son continued their daily routines, but they carried the lessons of the previous day with them. They approached conversations with more patience and listened carefully before reacting. They understood that hasty judgments could create unnecessary tension, and that respectful communication was always more effective. The young man felt more confident in managing his own behavior, knowing that staying calm and respectful was the right approach in any situation. Weeks later, they returned to the grocery store for their usual shopping. The young man moved calmly through the aisles, mindful of his behavior. Karen observed, proud of his progress and her own growth in patience and understanding. Maria, the cashier, noticed their respectful behavior and smiled quietly. The store felt peaceful, a reflection of the lessons learned by everyone involved. Alex, as always, continued his work as a police commander. He remained vigilant in his duties, knowing that patience, calmness, and professionalism were essential in every situation. He took satisfaction in knowing that he had not only prevented conflict but had also set an example for others. His actions had taught valuable lessons about respect, responsibility, and the power of calm authority. By the end of the week, Karen and her son often spoke about the incident. They shared the lessons with friends and neighbors, emphasizing the importance of observing before reacting, staying calm under pressure, and communicating respectfully. The story of the grocery store encounter became a small but meaningful example in the neighborhood, reminding everyone that patience, understanding, and thoughtful behavior were key to harmonious living. The young man and his mother continued to grow, guided by the lessons of respect and patience. Their experience with Alex became a turning point, shaping how they approached challenges and interactions in the future. They understood that anger and fear could cloud judgment, but calm observation and respectful behavior could resolve conflicts peacefully and effectively. As the sun set over the neighborhood, life returned to its quiet rhythm. The grocery store was peaceful, the streets were calm, and the lessons of the day remained fresh in the minds of Karen, her son, and the neighbors. Alex's calm professionalism had made a lasting difference. It had turned a tense situation into an opportunity for learning, growth, and understanding. The young man smiled at his mother as they returned home, both of them carrying a sense of pride, relief, and understanding. They knew that the events of that day would remain with them forever, a reminder of the importance of patience, respect, and thoughtful behavior in every part of life.